Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. If you are tuning in for the first time, thank you. And if you are coming back after my extended hiatus, I thank you as well. I am coming to you from my new apartment. My girlfriend and I are in our new place finally, and renovations are just about finished. We've put together almost the last few bits of the IKEA furniture, and things are looking good, and it is feeling like a home, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Feeling very relieved. This is a great episode to come back to after a while. On the show today is comedian John Rosenberger. John's probably the most positive, optimistic guy I know, and that's one of the things I love about him. And we had a really great chat. We kind of covered a whole bunch of stuff, and it was just good to see him. Being as busy as I am with my new day job, and also with the moving and the renovations, it's haven't been able to be around comedy people as much as I would like to. But it was great to sit down and just have a real nice chat with a comic. And John's a great guy to do that. And if you know somebody positive in your life, there's hold on to them, because they're going to be the ones that are going to get you through, and they have inspiration to do so. So let them. I personally have a hard time with that on occasion, but I'm glad that I feel like I'm loosening up on that a little bit, and that I'm able to embrace positivity the way I might not have always been able to. You guys are listening again for the first time. I am Will Carey. I'm also a comedian. If you want to rate the show on iTunes or Stitcher, it would help me out quite a bit. And as always, I appreciate you listening. If you enjoy the show and want to share it with a friend, feel free to do so as well. And I'm at Comic Will Carey on Twitter. So I would appreciate hearing from you. So thank you for coming back, and let's go to my chat with John Rosenberg. When we come into this, we are talking about the New York Rangers. John's a big hockey fan, and when we recorded this, they were not having the greatest of seasons. So that's what we're talking about when we come in. So enjoy my chat with John.
Goal games and stuff like that.
Ooh.
Well, not lost by 6 goals, but goals where you let up games.
You allow 6 goals. Yeah, those are
are hard to come back from.
Yeah, especially in low scoring games like hockey and soccer. Yeah. I mean, NYCFC are doing pretty good this year. They've got like 4 wins and a draw. But I always remember like the 7-0 whooping that they took against the Red Bulls.
Against the Red Bull, I work a couple times a year for a wrestling company that is run by Red Bull supporters, so we heard a lot about that when that happened.
Oh yeah, and they're
that was like the first year of New York NYCFC, right?
A second year, and they still NYCFC still hadn't beat the Red Bulls, because the first year lost all 3 games we played against them.
Right.
And then this was like the first one. All right, new season, it's gonna be different. And 7-0.
Right.
But I say, like, so when people like when sports fans like start leaving the game like towards the end, I
get very upset about it.
They get really upset, and I'm like, well, first off, I'm like, well, I paid for the ticket. I'm gonna stay here for the entire thing.
Right.
And then second, I'm like, it's not that bad. Like it's a bummer now, but you know,
I mean, and it's different in New York too, because you're taking public transit the same as everybody else. It's not like in LA where you're like, oh, I gotta leave to beat the traffic, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, you just we're all going to be on the same train of misery. And then we're all gonna, so many like pictures of the 7 train. I'm in a couple groups where I'm just like, oh, I took this train home, or oh, this is my favorite soda, 7-Up.
Yeah.
And then my friend had this Coke Zero. I think you gotta have a sense of humor about.
I mean,
about some of this
sports fandom is all about having a sense of humor. I feel like.
Yeah, and I'm late to it because I didn't for like the longest time. Like when I was like doing theater in high school and studying theater in college, I thought no, sports are for like alpha bro types, and that is not for me. For they will hurt you.
Yeah, well, I get that. You know,
it's always been.
I straddled that line a lot in my life. Like I was in band and I was in drama, but I also played hockey and football and stuff like that. So like,
yeah,
I feel like I was very blessed in a way to kind of not have that perspective of like, this is dumb, right, guys?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's some value to it. If anything, what I have started to get out of it, following soccer specifically, other than it being like a very worldly kind of game that is like an immediate talking point. Like when I was in Thailand, I was wearing like this hat, and they were like, "Oh, Frank Lampard." I'm like, "Yes, Frank Lampard."
Yeah.
More so than like, and just the amount of like just random high fives I get from strangers. Like no one after Wicked high fived me when I saw Wicked. Like I got no high fives after Wicked
right,
or
but that
after
feels
Rent.
The perfect thing to well, not Rent, but
yeah,
definitely
Rent's a little bit of a downer. No, and it's interesting you bring that up because you have this like this like sports fandom identity, but like. I find you as like one of the most relentlessly positive people I know amongst the comics.
Yeah, I've had that beaten into me in a way, you know. I had a lot of my family life is not great, and my parents are very old. So I, for a long time, like my sister was going down a lot of very troubling roads and stuff like that. So I had to be like the force of positivity in the home,
right?
Because like my parents, you could see on their faces how visibly worn down they were by like this constant barrage of negative energy. So I was like, well, let me help you out.
Yeah. So you're sort of like you're taking on the role of like a helping hand, like the come with me if you want to live sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Out of necessity, almost.
Yeah.
I'm hip to that. Like when if you're around people that are just beaten down by the circumstances that they're held, like that's an instinct, right? It's a good instinct to have because you can't just say sucks and it probably always will.
And always will.
Always will.
And also professionally, I was a social worker for mentally ill, chemically addicted adults for 5 years.
Oh yeah.
And then after that for inner city kids for 4 years. So I've been surrounded by circumstances where I'm just like, let me try to lighten this as much as I can, and I think that's ultimately what drew me to comedy.
Were those jobs in New York City?
Yeah, in East Harlem mostly. Well, West Harlem when I was working with adults, in East Harlem when I was working with kids, and I still work in East Harlem at a social work school now.
And how's that?
It's great. I don't do anything. It's wonderful. It's the only job I've ever had in my life where I can walk home at the end of the day and just be like, well, there's literally nothing about work that I can think about right now, you know? I was a salesman where my first job out of college was I was a business-to-business salesman working for what is essentially a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And in order to succeed in there, you had to be patently dishonest for the most part. So every day I would go home and I would be like, well, yeah, I did all right, but I convinced these people that they needed something that they didn't need so that I could like further my financial gain and stuff like that.
Right.
So that weighed on me, and then I left that to follow what is objectively a more noble path, but it still was a job that weighed on me a lot.
Right.
And now I work with spreadsheets. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I know I hit save on that document, so that's all I can do.
Yeah. There's just something to... I found I eventually, when I started getting like more office type jobs, I just so much comfort in that spreadsheet, just the quiet of that spreadsheet. Because I had for a number of years, I was like doing inbound customer service. I could never do outbound like cold calling or sales. Like I just do not have the personality for it at all.
Right.
But like inbound customer service, where again, it's that most of the people calling are angry about something, and the companies that were hiring me were not really good at them. Because when you're first starting, like I was in retail for a number of years, and then you got to work at shitty places before you can get hired at good ones. So again, lots of just mitigating anger.
Did you ever learn feel, felt, found when you were the 3 Fs when you were in inbound customer service?
I never heard that phrase, but I probably heard some variation on it.
Where if somebody is calling and they're angry and they're complaining, your first step is to assure them you know how they feel.
Yeah, empathy.
Your second
good.
Step is to assure them that others have felt the same way, so that they feel connected to the general universe. And then when you present them with the solution, but what they found is this.
Yeah, I think I've definitely had some variation on that, where someone's like, they're all hopped up, and you got to go, yeah, that sounds really bad, because I mean, what you're doing is really important.
Yeah,
and this is not making it so you can do that. So we've got to find a solution. Now, the thing you're screaming at me, I can't do that because I got rules I got to follow.
Right, exactly.
But I got to see what we can do.
Yeah, exactly.
So much of that stuff. I feel like that's now that we're on the kind of on this jaunt. I sort of wonder if that's why if that's sort of how I found like my niche in comedy also, because a lot of times when I'm producing shows, I don't know if you feel this way, I feel like the same way like when I was back at Target, like oh thank you so much for coming, we'll be starting starting shortly, all of that kind of stuff. It's just with drunk people,
right? And I noticed that I've just recently started producing a new show, and one of the big things to me is being by the exit to the showroom as soon as you can after the show ends, so that you can thank as many people as you can for coming to the show, and being like, "Thank you so much. You didn't have to come to this show. There's a ton of things you could have done tonight."
Yeah.
We hope, and I feel like making that personal connection helps put a face with the show, and then it ensures more repeat customers, because it's not just like, oh, this is a show happening in a vacuum. It's like, oh, I like that guy, and this is his show.
Yes, you become sort of like the Ronald McDonald of your
Brooklyn
bar show, and you're not just the bane of all the other bar shows that
happen concurrently
that are occurring, and everyone's like, Brooklyn bar shows 60 likes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious where this comes from, John. First of all, I'm trying to remember when I met you, because I feel like you, along with a few other people, I feel like I've kind of always known, but I can't remember how I've come to know you. It's probably related to sports or a show we were on.
It's probably a show. My guess would probably be where I know a lot of the comedians that I know that kind of hover in our common social circle. Yeah, is like when Stand and Deliver used to do their like marathon shows and stuff like that.
Yep, I remember that.
And I'm sure I've met you. I'm sure we've done a couple of those together at least.
Definitely, I think so. Shout out to John Baldacini.
Yeah,
it's a good show. Are you from New York?
For all intents and purposes, yeah. I moved here when I was 9 years old.
9 years old. Where are you from? Where are you from?
Berkshire County, Massachusetts.
Berkshire County, Massachusetts. Where's that?
It's the far northwestern tip, like almost like we're like 3.5 to 4 hours from Boston, and we are 45 minutes to an hour from Albany, New York.
Okay, so that's sort of like western rural Massachusetts.
Yeah, exactly.
Like woods and camping territory.
Yeah, lots of hippies.
Oh yeah,
yeah, big hippie. Like we had one general store in our town, but we had 3 glass blowing shops.
Oh, yep. Yeah, that's a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
That the glass blowing shop and like the handcrafted earrings.
Mm-hmm. Handcrafted earrings. We had a lot of stores that sold extracts.
What are those?
Like vanilla, like they're flavorings, but they're like naturally curated flavorings. So it's just
sounds like a dry run of Bushwick before Bushwick.
It kind of was. It's what Bushwick I think wishes it was. It's like it's you know what it is? It's more like a combination of Bushwick and Woodstock, New York, and like Woodstock culture and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm hip to what you're putting out there. Yeah, a lot of jam band festivals, and like this song is 45 minutes long.
But we also have a big amphitheater that has that hosts like Garrison Keillor and stuff like that. So it's kind of folksy and hippie at the same time.
That's interesting. I never thought about Massachusetts having areas like that. When I had Mike Lemmy on, he's from outside of Boston as well. My idea of Massachusetts he gave me is it's a lot of like kind of like either strung out people or like drunk bros who are just upset the Sox haven't won another pennant.
Yeah, I mean that's Eastern Massachusetts. That's like that's like Boston adjacent area.
Gotcha.
Know? And then around Northampton or Springfield, you hit kind of a divide, and we still have a lot of strung out people. The town before I was born into it, there was a lot of General Electric factories and stuff like that, and then slowly General Electric outsourced their jobs, so a lot of those closed. So we have a lot of the post-industrial blight that a lot of cities would have, but we're also kind of in the woods.
Yeah. So like a town that's predominantly an industry town, and then the industry leaves, and then there's economic decrease.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's such a common story in America.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's happening in other countries. I'm just not hearing about it.
Right. Exactly.
But like, you think like Detroit, it's only happening to Detroit, but no, there's just like mini Detroits.
There's little pockets,
Yeah. I wonder about that because I'm from like a really rural part of Maryland. Technically, technically it's considered a suburb of Washington, D.C. because it's like you can get to D.C. in an hour. The main jobs in Calvert County where I'm from, I can't even really say the town because the town is so small, so I just say the county.
Yeah.
The big jobs are working for the county, Department of Education, and then I think after that is the nuclear power plant.
Right.
So think about that nuclear power plant, like if something were to ever... Well, definitely I would have been vaporized if it ever melted down. But, so there's that. But,
yeah.
But no, it's just so crazy because like you have to think that business owners like are aware of the impact that moving jobs is going to have.
Right. I just don't think they care.
Yeah. I couldn't do that. That's why like I could never be I don't think I could be a really good CEO like the way like your Steve Jobs is, or like insert whatever like major CEO or billionaire you can think of, because there's a certain level of ruthlessness and psychopathy that you seem to have to step on people to get up.
Yes.
Which is again what capitalism is apparently founded on, but
but it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good.
No,
like there's still the void. You know, like I sometimes wonder, like I can't remember what the like major document or article of capitalism is, but if there was a book written, it's like, hey, it's pretty good to be comfortable and then to make sure other people are comfortable. Like, if that book had gotten written, very different history.
I mean,
I don't know. I'm just if people read it,
know?
I mean, not that I'm a political scientist, but I spitball when I am talking to comedians because they will indulge these weird ideas.
I studied political science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In college.
In college.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm kind of interested in tracing this kind of like $1 million Slumdog Millionaire in your life.
Okay.
So what did So you said your home life is rough. What were your folks like growing up? What did they do?
My mom has always been a social worker, and more recently has become a therapist. My dad is a lawyer.
What kind of law?
When I was growing up, it was civil rights law.
Mm-hmm.
Now he just, as he got older, he had to pay for a lot of things that people shouldn't have to pay for. To diverge, and then we'll get back for a second.
Totally.
My sister is a very serious heroin addict.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So they've had to pay for a lot of rehabs, bailing her out of stuff and stuff like that. So now he works for a corporate law firm because he's a German citizen, and they do a lot of business in Germany. So he can travel there very easily, and he speaks German fluently.
Wow. German citizen. Is he a dual citizen here, or
he is a dual citizen here? I'm a dual citizen.
You're of America and Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you can just go like hang out. Have you ever been?
Not as an adult.
Not as an adult.
As a child, yes.
Cool. That's interesting to me. I've never been to Germany, but my mother's main name is Gettel, so I know it's brewing.
It's there somewhere.
It's definitely brewing. That's fascinating. That's also because again, like your mom was a social worker and is now a therapist, so it's like the help gene is like
it's very deeply ingrained.
It's very deeply ingrained. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about your sister. I didn't know you were dealing with that. But.
Saying it's okay, I think would be a little flip, but
is it at least manageable currently?
Well, yeah, kind of, because she's in jail. So,
sorry. Anything if you want to stop this,
I don't.
We can turn around.
No. She's in jail. I think, and I have thought for a long time that that's the best place for her to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a place that you know where she is at all times.
No, that makes sense.
Because for a long time she was bouncing around the city and then later bouncing around the country, just shacking up with guys that were helping her get her fix on and stuff like that. You never knew where she was going to be until you got a call from a police department or something like that, you know?
Right.
And every time for a long, long time, every time my parents would get the call, they'd be like, all right, well, we're going to go bail her out. And I was like, no, let her stay in jail. Let her stay there because you know where she is. And they have even though it's more punitive and arguably rougher in a lot of ways, it's a far more manageable way to keep tabs on a person.
That is true. If you are in jail, you are within the confines.
You are within the confines of
that building.
Exactly.
You are in only a few places. Wow, that's a very pragmatic way of looking at that.
And that's a thing that is a very prevalent theme in my life. Is the not convergence, whatever the opposite of convergence is, because my sister has divergence, right? My sister is a very artistic and free-minded person, and I've always been a pragmatist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what made me a good social worker, and all that stuff is everybody's dealing with all these abstract ideas of chaos.
Yeah.
But one of the best things you can do to combat that abstract idea of chaos is to be like, here are very real steps that we are going to take to make sure or to put you on the right path.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, well, things are going to be okay and all that stuff. A lot of social work is that. A lot of social work is trying to talk people off of veritable ledges in one way or another. But a very important part of that is just being like, right, but this is how we're going to do that. Because that encourages more faith than just like, I'm here for you.
Yeah. No, that's important. It makes me think of like when the difference between like someone who's running for president versus someone who's being president.
Yes.
Like running the campaign is conceivably the fun part.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, things should be like this and we're going to do this. And there's less focus on okay, what are the steps that are going to take to make this happen, and how are we going to get around the people who don't want that to happen?
Mm-hmm.
That's what actually being president
Right.
is. So that's important. That's important steps. That's an important way to think. I'd be interested to see how that plays into comedy later. Was your so given that your sister's a struggling heroin addict is currently in jail, was your relationship with her growing up a dicey one, or were there times that
No, we always had it was generally good because we had going into it, we had a very real understanding that we were entirely different people. So then that allowed us to just be like, well, these are the superficial things that we can bond over.
Right.
So then a lot of the deeper stuff doesn't bother you as much because it doesn't, she can be vomiting in the bathroom and all that, but that doesn't stop the fact that when she comes out, we can still talk about Reno 911.
Right.
And stuff like that,
Oh, totally.
So that's the basis of our relationship, and I think that's what has allowed us to maintain a relationship, even though there's a lot of deep emotional trauma there. Because I feel like if we didn't have that, it would be very easy to just write it off and just be like, I need to focus on my own life. I can't deal with this,
Right.
But because we have these dumb little things that we can connect on, then we can connect on those stuff and talk about that stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm all about like finding those like tiny connections because like I've never felt like I've had much of a sense of community outside of the things I'm interested in,
right,
or what I'm into, because I can't connect with people around where I'm from because not a lot of people know where I'm from, and also it's not I don't have a lot of fondness for
right.
where I'm from. I don't have a lot of state pride. I don't have a lot of state pride. I don't have necessarily a lot of like nationalist kind of pride or anything like that. And I can't bond with anybody over my race because that just leads to a rally.
Right. Exactly.
So it's like soccer, great. Theater, great. Dragon Ball Z, great.
Yeah.
Pro wrestling, excellent.
Right. Well, wrestling is a huge part of a lot of my adult relationships, believe it or not.
Yeah?
Yeah. Most of my friends that I consider very good friends are people that I can connect with on about wrestling.
Yeah. A lot of stand-up comics.
A lot of stand-up comics.
Can you help me understand this question? I don't know if it's been asked. Why do you think so many stand-up comics like pro wrestling?
Because I think that I have a lot of opinions about this. Thank you for asking.
I would love to know this because I definitely know I wanted to be a pro wrestler at one point. So I'm curious what it is about pro wrestling that
I think that from a base level, the best comics and the best wrestlers are people who are essentially their personas, except
dialed up
a little bit. And I think that's a big part of it. I think being able to have a distinct point of view and have it feel true is something that both comedy audiences and wrestling audiences can sniff out very quickly.
Right.
So like people can be like, no, this wrestling character rings false, or no, this comic,
he's not really,
their point of view is not what they really are. What they're putting out is not their real point of view,
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Like, that's why, like, if you go to like a lot of urban rooms, there's the white guy who acts like a black guy.
Yeah.
If that he's authentically that,
yeah,
he'll crush. But if he's not that, he'll get destroyed. He'll get destroyed immediately. Yeah, like the same way with I'm thinking about like my favorite wrestlers, because I'm child of the Attitude Era. That's what I was allowed to watch. I was never really connected with WCW, and I don't think my mom let me watch ECW. Kind of.
I grew up with ECW. That's my most fond childhood wrestling.
Is that what first got you into wrestling when you were?
No, I liked wrestling when I. Do you mind if I ask how old you
are? Sure. I'm turning 32 in a couple weeks.
Okay. I'm 37.
You're 37. Okay.
So, I had a childhood enjoyment of wrestling from like the Hulk Hogan, WWF kind of days and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was only a very surface level thing. And then kind of at the same time I was getting really into comedy, I started getting really into wrestling because my parents would let me stay up on Saturday nights to watch Saturday Night Live. And then they would fall asleep about halfway through. And then in New York, you could flip over at 1 o'clock to MSG. And they had ECW.
Yeah. Like the original.
Like the original ECW in like VFW halls and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the like gritty heart, like Nirvana in like the club days.
Exactly.
Kind of ECW.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So like that was like I was like, oh, this is what I love, you know.
And like those thinking about so like what cast of SNL would that have been? I know we're kind of jumping.
That was later. That was like late era Chris Farley.
Okay.
Rob Schneider, Sandler. But like not later Sandler where he was kind of too big, like when like Opera Man was taking off and kind of stuff like that, you know.
And Farley had Farley like Matt Foley, like talking.
Yeah, Matt Foley. I have very distinct memories of watching the Gap sketches live.
Ah, yes.
Like David Spade, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler as the three women who worked at the Gap.
Talking about big characters. So like you have those big, like Farley's like such a huge physical comedic actor, like you know, like the like with his movement and like his huge characters, and then going to comparing that to like the ECW originals. I'm probably gonna forget a few, but I'm thinking about like Sabu,
Rob Van
Dam, Axl Rotten.
My favorite and still my favorite wrestler, even though if we were to speak on a very objective level, I could tell you he's a bad wrestler, is New Jack.
New Jack. New Jack, I think, is legit. I'm legitimately afraid of. Like
I met him 2 years ago, and he's an relatively old man at this point, and I was still
see that tinge.
Terrified. He's scarred up, and it's very intimidating just physically. And then I went up to him to ask to take a picture. I was working on a show that he was a guest on. And I went up to ask for a picture, and I was so scared because he just gives off this vibe like, I will cut you if you say the wrong thing to me. Even as an adult, he was wearing he was wearing a suit that if I pointed it out to you in a catalog, you'd be like, yeah, that's a suit that New Jack would wear.
I know. I know exactly what you exactly
like
what
a Kings of Comedy kind of suit.
Yeah, totally. Like a very loud suit. Okay.
It was all white, but it was very kind of billowy. Like it almost looked like it was pajamas.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm thinking of like I remember Kings of Comedy, like Steve Harvey's like big yellow suit. So I'm piecing that.
Imagine that suit, but just white instead of yellow.
Okay, got it. Excellent. The pieces are together.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you were watching like SNL and ECW? Was that
this is like 12, 13?
Okay.
Is when I first started watching it, and then I continued to watch it up until it kind of sold out and went on like TNN and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when ECW went to TNN. I remember hearing rumblings of that. I've been going back and watching like a lot of old documentaries because it seems like interesting era in the business.
But right around then is also at like the cresting of the Attitude Era. So like yeah. So then it was a very easy transition once I started to feel like ECW is kind of selling out to be like, but this is pretty cool with Austin and
Yeah.
the 3 Faces of Foley and all that stuff.
I met Mick Foley once. I know you like him because I know you did Will and Mike's show. And then I'll get back on the timeline. So I used to work the door at a comedy club, and it was New Year's Eve, and Sherry O'Terry was hosting 5 shows. I think she had just started doing stand-up. Like,
oh boy,
very, very early.
Yeah.
And the early shows were they were good, but there were some rough patches. So there was a lot of, and I was managing like crazy drunk people, and then like some dudes from like the Italian members only society came through, and they're definitely in the mob, I think.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at the will call list, and I see Michael Foley, and I turn around, and Mankind is like, "Oh, Michael Foley," and I was like, "Yes, I know who you are."
That's awesome.
It was, and he was so nice. Like we sat him down, and we basically, because the guy who's the manager at the time recognized him too, and I was trying to play it cool, but he immediately went to, "Oh man, Hell in the Cell." Yeah. Which I sure hears everywhere. So
I'm sure.
But he like sat and watched the show, and I think we're like, whatever he wants. And then afterwards it's like, oh, I know you don't like Cactus Jack's theme music, but I really like that guitar riff. And he's like, oh, but it's so generic. Generic was like, but it just worked for me, man.
Right.
And
that's great.
He was so cool. I would love to sit down and just listen to him, because he seems like a cool dude.
Can I go back to the wrestling and comedy connection?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I think that another part that it speaks to a lot of people, and a lot of people don't realize this until they consume certain pieces of media.
Yeah.
Is how similar the ascension path is.
No, it really is.
Like, because you know, if you're a comic, you start out at open mics. If you're a wrestler, you start at wrestling school. And when you start getting booked on shows, at first they're like little shitty bar shows, and wrestling has all these little shitty independent federations all around. Like, my favorite thing in the whole wide world is to go watch wrestling shows at there's a Elks Lodge on Queens Boulevard
in Jackson Heights.
Yes,
I think I know the one you're talking about. Do they still do wrestling there?
They do wrestling there at least once a month, and it is so fun to go and just be, and it feels like you're in a time machine, because you're just like, here's all these drunk idiots in a little fucking Elks Lodge, and where they would have the same place. Once I went to a wrestling show there that was delayed by 45 minutes because the quinceañera that was there beforehand took too long to break down, and like they were
oh my god, that's such of course it would be delayed because of a quinceañera.
And there were like still like themed balloons in the building and stuff like that. It was great. So that's like your low level bar shows.
Yeah, those are your low level bar shows.
And then you get up to things like
like maybe you're featuring for a well-known comic.
There's a couple people who are like big name people who will come in and take some money, and then most of you are featuring and stuff like that. Then you get to how familiar are you with independent wrestling? Familiar at all?
Not really,
Okay.
but
So
I'm.
So then you have
here
federations like this thing called PWG, which is in California, which sells out every show in 15 minutes and stuff like that.
So like your bigger.
That's like your Knitting Factory. That's like
that's like
your Whiplash and stuff
Knitting
like that.
Factory, like the big alternative shows. So you're maxing out in
you're
the
maxing out
world.
in your local scene, but you're not quite hitting the clubs. And you're hitting the clubs, which are like Ring of Honor, TNA, stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe you're doing a guest spot, maybe you're doing a run in, or you're jobbing.
Right. And then there's a select few who really crack to the next level, and those are your Comedy Central half hours, those are your HBO specials and stuff like that.
Yeah. On a similar note, because I don't know what the comedy equivalent of this would be. What is the comedy equivalent of after your contract is not renewed and you are back at those indie shows? Because that's for me as a performer, that is the part that freaks me out the most when I see that happen to wrestlers. Because the only thing I guess is to either do that or to get a job.
Yeah, you either get like a lot of people get in wrestling it would be a training job. In comedy, it would be like a writing job for like a for like a
maybe like a show on Freeform.
A show on Freeform or a show on MTV or something like that. You know.
Yeah.
And then you have the people who, I'm always so proud of this comparison, even though it's very dumb and it makes very little sense to a lot of people. There's a wrestler named Homicide.
I've heard of him.
And he's back up in TNA now, but for a while he had been released from all the major federations, and he very much reminded me of like kind of like a Mark Normand in a way, where he can work on a high stage and he can do stuff like that, but he's not above dropping into a little bar show from time to time if he's in the area and he's asked.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah, absolutely.
So, like, I've seen Homicide in stadiums, and then 2 weeks later, I've seen him in, like, a truck garage in South Slope or, like, Sunset Park and stuff like that. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you'll do it. It's all about having fun and trying to make money while you do it at this point.
Yeah, yeah, that's a guy who loves what he does. That's what I connect with.
And he misses the green room or the locker room or whatever you want to call it when he's not working. So he's just like, I'd rather hang out in the locker room with a bunch of jamokes who are just starting out than sit at home and not do anything,
Yeah, totally. No, that makes total sense. So how much so wrestling, and does wrestling kind of you say wrestling kind of informs your early like takes and opinions on comedy, or does wrestling become like the thing?
It was just the two fascinations ran concurrent. They didn't really influence each other.
And that started when you were like 13?
Yeah, 12 or 13. Like I started getting into comedy.
What kind of kid were you? Were you sort of like, I don't see you as being like the shy nerdy kid, but I don't see you as being
I was pretty shy. I was pretty nerdy. But like I said, I was also an athlete. So that forced me into a lot of social situations,
Yeah, you're the guy on. We would have been friends in high school, but people would have been like, "Why are they friends?"
Exactly. But I would have gone. I'm on both sides of that. So like, I was telling somebody the other day. I was like, "Would it surprise you to find out that I was at the same time both the most popular person?" or both the coolest person in my jazz band ensemble and the least cool person on my hockey team.
No, that makes sense.
That's where my position was. Like I was just like, I could go wherever because I was friends with whoever, but I never felt particularly comfortable in any of those situations.
I was sort of the same way. Like I sort of got. I was done with sports by the time I got to high school, but I think I was playing a little bit of basketball because if you're a certain height, you have to. But what I excelled at most was being a soccer goalie.
Yeah,
because it's the most individual thing you can do on a soccer team. So I liked that part of it, and not a lot of running, and again, just sort of like don't let the ball get behind you. Don't let the ball get behind you.
Right.
So that's I completely forgot the point I was going to make, but I relate to you because I didn't feel like home until my best friend finally convinced me to audition for a play, and I was like, okay, now I actually want to work hard. Like I didn't want to work. I was bare minimum all the way until I was like theater. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you said your home life was kind of rocky during this time, and feel free to answer this any way you want. Is there a certain is any of this, how much of wrestling and comedy is a coping mechanism early on?
I think they're both very big coping mechanisms in different ways. I think comedy is a coping mechanism of relief.
Yeah.
Like you'd sit there and be like, this is funny. I'm enjoying myself watching this. It's taking me away from these things that are troubling me.
Yeah.
But wrestling is the polar opposite of that, which is full engagement of your aggressive anger and disappointment.
Kind of like your id, almost like
sure.
Well, it's like your more base level instincts,
yes.
where you're sort of because again, like a good wrestling show's for me almost like a ancient Greek play, where there's very clear definitions of who we are, of who is good, who is bad. Taking out like the smart marks and like all the people on the internet who are like, oh no, that person shouldn't be getting a push, that person should be getting a push. Taking that part out of it, just like the sheer pageantry of the show itself, and that's sort of like the cathartic sort of like justice when the bad guy gets his butt kicked righteously.
Yes.
That I'm hip to that. Like you're satisfying those kind of base urges. Almost, I feel it's almost like animalistic in a kind of way compared to, for which again we were saying for comedy as a form of relief when someone like my favorite jokes I if I don't laugh I'm like I'm not the only one thinking that thought.
Yeah, that's the best is when you hear something that is both funny but also makes you feel understood.
Yeah, which I imagine if you come from a social worker and a civil rights lawyer originally, again going back to empathy.
Yeah.
All kind of is rooted from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's 100% correct.
Yeah. What so okay, so you're in New York. What part of New York did you live in growing
Spanish
up?
Harlem.
Spanish Harlem. Okay, so that's like 100 and like 35th Street on the 4-5?
A little further east, a little further south, like 110th and like First Avenue.
Okay, 110th and First Avenue. So that's where like your childhood was.
Yeah.
Was like chopped cheese sandwich
territory. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, awesome. So your kid growing up in Manhattan in the 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s, early 90s. So New York still has some grit.
Yes.
I always like hearing stories about New York before it became Disneyfied. Okay. Because my girlfriend is born and raised in Prospect Heights.
Okay.
So it's very nice now, but we would go be like, oh, yep, someone got stabbed there. Someone got shot there. Someone got raped and shot there. Any memorable stories from that era of New York for you, John?
Just a lot of. I was telling somebody the other day that the one thing I miss from the old New York is how good my cardio was because I had to run home a lot of times. Like I would get off the train and some weird old guy would be like, "Hey, let me get $1," and I'd be like, "No, I don't have $1." And he'd be like, "I said, give me $1," and he'd start like moving towards me, and I'd be like, "Well, time to run home.
Time to run." Gym memberships were down because all practical.
It
was all
sprint
practical
from 116th Street in Lexington to 110th and First.
Oh Jesus, damn! That is just the sheer concept of having to run home because danger was behind you.
Yeah,
more people need to feel that.
Oh yeah,
if more people felt that, I bet we could fix a lot of stuff.
A lot of things.
Yeah. Oh man, the same way I think everyone's got to wait tables or work retail one year in their lives. Everyone has to live in a really dangerous neighborhood.
Yeah. Preferably at the same time, because then they have to fear for their tips, and they know they have that cash in their pocket, and that makes them even more scared.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, we just not only did I think we came up with a great solution for social change, but that also could be a reality show.
It could be a reality show. That would be a great reality show. I think. Just obviously, it would be. It would not be very popular amongst the general social diaspora. I think.
Yeah, but
because a lot of people would think that you're unfairly painting certain areas and the people who reside in those areas in a bad light. But at the same time,
I bet
there'd be a thrilling competition.
Yes, and I bet there's some people that'd be like, "I'm hip to what you're doing."
Yeah,
I see it.
right. I think a lot of actually now that I think about it, I think a lot of people would enjoy seeing the legitimate terrified reactions. I think of getting off the subway and just seeing a man with a knife, and
right?
Just being like, look at how those people are reacting. Finally, they're feeling some discomfort in their lives.
Yes, heck of a hidden camera show.
Yeah.
So, did you go to college in New York?
No, I went to college in Arizona.
Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Big change.
Big change.
And for political science.
Yes.
So
did not finish.
How far did you do?
I have 117 out of 120 credits.
Oh, so you were close.
I didn't know I didn't finish.
Oh, okay. You could probably go back and get those through, right?
Yeah, I definitely could, but they're Spanish classes. It's actually one Spanish class, but it's Spanish 202, and I'm so far removed now that all my other Spanish credits don't count anymore. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to take Spanish 202 at a class, I would have to start again at 101 and then work my way up to 202.
Right.
Just so that I don't have the motivation to take 4 Spanish classes.
No, Dios mío. I can see where. So, did you come back to New York after college?
Yeah.
And where is comedy for you at this point? Where does stand up start factoring in? Because
I didn't start stand up until I was 31 years old.
So you started later.
Yes.
So what? So when you get out of college and come back to New York, how old are you?
I am 23.
So we've got 8 years. Mm-hmm. What's going on during
working
that time?
A lot.
Being in the same field.
Well, that's when I started. I did sales for 2 years. And then I transitioned to social work, and I was generally unhappy during a lot of that time for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. So most of my time and money went into various bartenders' pockets.
Right. Gotcha.
And then I had a friend who was a bartender, but also the guy I would buy weed from, and had also been the same person I bought weed from when I was in high school. So, and I was hanging out with him at a bar called Identity, which was in the East Village.
Yeah.
And Calvin Cato was hosting an open mic there.
Ah, Calvin. Yes.
And I watched a lot of people go up and eat shit. And I was like, you've been doing this for years, and you're eating your own dick on stage. I bet I could do this for the first time and get the same amount of laughs as you. And that's how I started comedy. Yeah. And then I quit after 3 months. Because I was dating a woman. Okay, so the first time I started comedy was probably 28, 29.
Okay, and all this is in New York?
All this is in New York.
So coming up in New York, just finding your voice and just getting you're comfortable on stage in New York, I imagine has to be just several kicks into the head and balls.
Right. Well, when I first started, I wasn't concerned with having a voice. I was just like, here are jokes that I wrote. I wasn't taking it very seriously. And the woman I was seeing at the time was a dancer and a musical theater actress. And she was like, if you're not taking this seriously, you should quit. Because people are taking it seriously, and ultimately you're taking time away from people who are really trying to do this.
Yep.
And I was like, you are right. So I quit.
Okay. And then what happens after?
And then I quit for about 3 years. And then I go to this bar that's by my house called No Malice Palace. And Will Winter had just started hosting an open mic there. Yeah. And I was hanging out with him. He and I are very similar in a lot of ways. Yeah. As far as positivity and encouragement and all that stuff goes.
Yeah, I always like to engage with your Facebook posts because he always maybe it's an ego boost, but you're just genuine, and I sometimes need to hear that from someone that isn't my
I think people do, and I think that's the important thing. You know, I think that's why I do it, is because I understand the importance of the symbiotic relationship of positivity. You know, you ultimately feel good because you're helping other people feel good.
Yes.
So that's why I do a lot of that. But I told him the story about my girlfriend and all that stuff. And he was, a lot of people, when I tell them that story, they're like, yeah, that's a great point. You shouldn't be taking time away from people who are really trying to make this their life.
Right.
But he was like, that's fucking stupid. He's like, you're not taking time away from anybody. You're also participating in the thing with them. So if it's a thing that you feel like you want to do, you should still do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to do it. I want to try it. I want to really try investing myself in it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to feel like I'm taking time away from people. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come every week, and I volunteer to go up in the last group every week. Because that way, nobody feels like jilted. You know, that's not somebody fucking around in the first group.
Totally.
But then that also instilled a different kind of work ethic, because I was like, well, this is a bigger challenge, because now I know that I'm going up in front of exhausted people, so I know.
Yeah, 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, and you know.
Yeah.
And I did that for 6 months. 6 months I went up, in the last 5 people in this mic that at the time would at times go 3 hours, 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
Because it was, everybody would come. He would never cut time, so everybody did 5 minutes. And it was just like, okay. And then one day he was like, I'm not going to keep putting you in the last group. You have to start throwing your name in the bucket. Because I feel like going up in the last group is becoming a crutch.
Right.
You've worked hard enough that you can get laughs in the last group, but now you feel like you don't have to work any harder because you still know you're going in the last group. So now I'm going to make you go up in the first group, and you have to work even harder, because now you're in front of everybody. You're not just in front of 6 people who stuck out the whole mic.
Right. Who are also probably in the last group.
Who are also either in the last group or have literally nothing else to do with their time. They're just like, I guess I'll hang out, you know?
Sure. That's a good thing that he did that. Yeah. Because otherwise, I think if you just keep just in that last group, you just probably end up like, why am I? And you might end up quitting again. Like, why am I doing this?
Right.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm glad that you think. I hope you think and feel that you should be in the first group, or
I do now.
last group.
The first couple times I was like, I don't belong here. I was like, that's Joe Pera, that's Anthony DeVito. Those are like people who are gonna be something huge one day. Like, what am I doing going up in right after them? You know. But then eventually I was like, well, we're all just trying to work out our new stuff.
Yeah.
And then one of the most significant moments for me as a comedian was I was on a show with Joe Pera, and this was after he had kind of phased out of the having to go to open mics every week scene.
Yeah.
And I was on a show with him, and he came up to me. He's like, man, you're so much better than you were when the last time I saw you at that mic. And I was like, you're a person that, like, I always was like, this is somebody that I think is the best, and something like that. That's a big one. And when Joe Firestone asked me to be on, I almost said Professor Blastoff. This is a different podcast. Dr. Game Show.
Yes.
But this was when it was on WFMU on the radio and not on
Earwolf.
Yeah. And she was like, you should come do this show. And a lot of times you get told you should do something, and then you're like, yeah, cool, and then nobody ever is like
follows up.
Yeah. And I was like, cool, yeah, what, that sounds great. And then 3 days later, she's like, here are 3 dates. Which one would you like to do? I was like, oh, this is somebody who I respect so much that has enough respect for me that they want me to work with them,
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's important that, and I think comedy, especially, maybe coming back to pro wrestling, because again, it's an entire industry built on recommendations and word of mouth, lest you become the comedy mass transit incident.
Exactly. Again, New Jack.
New Jack.
Bring it back to New Jack.
To bring it back to New Jack.
But that felt like, to again piggyback off the wrestling thing, that felt like Joe Firestone was like, I'm going to put you over.
Yeah.
You're
getting put over. Vader's going to give you a clean 1, 2, 3
exactly
on Sunday Night Heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense to me. And man, I live for those kinds of moments. Whenever stuff like that happens, even like when I was starting in Baltimore, and like the big guy in Baltimore was Mickey Coachella. He was the morning drive time guy on the Modern Rock station for a number of years. He'd sell out like weekends at the Comedy Factory, and I'm not getting booked at the Comedy Factory just on cold emails, but like I went up and had some killer guest sets, and then he still remembers me.
Yeah.
So oddly, it's important that those moments happen for people, because it's just like such a leg up in the darkness as it can be sometimes.
And it's funny how you don't think about stuff until later. Do you know the comedian Tommy Pope?
Tommy Pope. That name sounds so familiar.
Have you ever seen the show Delco Proper?
No.
It's a Comedy Central kind of web series type thing, but it's like one of those web series that sometimes they'll also play late at night on the actual network and stuff like that. He was doing a couple nights at the Stress Factory, and Casey was featuring for him, and he was like, you should come and do some guest sets. And at the time I was like, he's just asking me because he knows I have a car and I can drive him down there,
Yeah.
But now that I think about it, like a couple years later, I'm like, yeah, but there's any number of comedians who also have cars that he could have asked. And the fact that like he asked you still means that he thought of you.
Yeah.
But my instinct is always to try to tamp down any sense of flattery.
Right.
So like that's why, for example, when he asked me to do that, I was like, "Oh, it's just because I have a car." Or a lot of this tamping down has to do with cars. Or like, Carmen Lagala was doing 5 days around New England, and was like, "You should come." And again, I was like, "Well, it's just because I could drive, But then it's like, no, she has, but then you talk to all these other comics who also have cars that are equally friendly with that, and we're like, oh no, there's a reason that she asked you,
yeah. There is definitely there is great value on being uniquely hilarious and enjoyable to be around.
Yes,
that I feel is not talked about enough. So I feel like more so than of course the jokes are good, but I think after a certain point, everybody's jokes are good. So it's those other unique kind of things that sort of will be beneficial.
I agree.
Long term. Dude, this has been great. We're about an hour. We might have to do. I would do another one at some point if you want to just.
Yeah, I'd love to do another one.
If you would want to do another one, we just talk about, like, I know we didn't really get to hockey or music, but I will to close it out. You mentioned something about a speed dance metal band that you were
Demon Speed?
Demon Speed.
They are a swing metal band.
Swing metal. What is swing metal?
It is a it is a genre that I think only exists for that band.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of kind of like stand-up bassy kind of like riffs, and then heavy chunky guitars.
Is there a lot
crooning, crooning vocals?
Crooning vocals. I'm gonna have to listen to that because I'm very curious what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the metal version of Tiger Army.
Yeah,
almost.
That's a very good. I think that's a very good analog. That post came about because I feel like I'm just name dropping left and right.
Oh no, it's okay. Because I'll tell you after you go, I'll tell I'll tell like an obscure bad metal band that I own, whose album I owned.
So most of my life, I've been a hardcore kid.
Uh-huh.
A hardcore, especially New York hardcore.
Ooh, New York hardcore, yeah.
And like I was 14 in 1995, so I was like to it when it was like really the big thing.
Yeah.
And like CBGB's was still around, and Coney Island High was still around, Castle Heights were still around.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a comedian named Micah Brucey,
mm-hmm.
who he was from Long Island.
Yeah.
And he and I share a lot of crossover because the New York hardcore bands and the Long Island hardcore bands kind of bounce back and forth a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about a band called Life of Agony.
I've heard of them.
And he was like, "This is such a." I was so into this when I was younger, but this is so bad. And I was like, listening to it, and I was like, "This reminds me of this." And we were talking about it, and we were just talking about bad hardcore bands that we were into. And I felt like going on. You've alluded to it a few times.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of social media is a very negative place to be.
Yeah.
I think it's fun to engage people in fun, non-negative conversations on social media.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I felt like, what's your favorite bad hardcore band? Is a bit too niche.
It's pretty niche.
So I was just like, what's a bad band that you guys are into?
Uh-huh.
You know? And I know enough people who are metalheads, punk rock fans like you,
yes,
hardcore kids, ska kids, that I knew that there were going to be a lot of punk and hardcore and ska bands in there.
Yes.
But I still wanted to hear people be like Hanson or Jimmy's Chicken Shack or like just stupid bands. And I was like, this is so much fun.
Yeah. No, I loved it. I love to, and my metal phase is one, and this will be how we can close it out. My metal phase is definitely the one I can look back on most and go, why did I just bought that because it was $7 at Target.
Yeah.
My pop punk bands, although I've got a ton of great pop punk that I've gotten into from bands in Japan that I just think is really awesome, and I'm glad that it exists.
Do you like Subomato?
I haven't not heard of them, but I haven't heard them. I'm really into Septiluck.
Okay.
Alternative Medicine is another one, and then Radwimps, who did the soundtrack for my favorite movie.
What movie is that?
It's an anime called Your Name.
Okay.
It's they did the soundtrack, they did the score, and they did 4 songs, and I just fucking bawl my eyes out because the songs are so good and so emotional. But my metal phase, I was like, okay, that's a cool album cover, because I think that's how you should shop for CDs. Like, oh, I'll get that. It could suck or it could be great. And there's from the new metal era.
Yes.
Like offshoots of like Korn and bands like that. Like we could go to like a Dema or a Primer 55.
Yeah.
Or Static X,
Mushroomhead,
Mudvayne, like all bands like that. The one that sticks out for me the most, and you should look it up, is Darwin's Waiting Room.
Ooh, I have to look this up. This sounds great.
They put out one. I'm pretty sure they only put out one album. It was called Orphan, and it's a monkey's face on the cover. I'll play it to you after we get off air. they try to do the dual vocal singing rapping thing like Linkin Park, but they have all the 7-string guitar chugging of Korn.
Yeah.
And it is a special kind of unusual. I don't know if I ever listened to this CD all the way through once, but I still find myself singing like the first line of the one song in the video. Yeah, nu metal didn't age very well.
No, it did
the
not.
exception of the bands that could also play acoustic.
Yes,
because I still think Stained have some good songs. In my opinion,
I think they're fine.
Yeah.
This was so much fun.
This was great, John. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And let's definitely do a music centered one next time.
Okay.
And I don't know when the playoffs start, but maybe next season let's hit up a Rangers game.
Yeah. I would love to. I used to be a season ticket holder to the Rangers.
Yeah.
And I used to be able to sell enough tickets that I could pay for my season. For 8 years, I bought the first set of season tickets, and then I just sold enough every year to pay for the next year, and I never touched it, and I only went to that. And the past couple years, they've not been good, and I started losing money on it.
Yeah.
And at the same time I was losing money, they started raising the prices, so I'm no longer a season ticket holder, but I would love to go to a game.
Sounds good. And if I ever have an extra ticket for NYCFC,
please.
A few comics have come with me, but you haven't yet, so we'll make that happen.
I'd love to go.
Excellent. Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, folks, that's our show. Thank you for listening. If you want to share the show with a friend, we are on iTunes and Stitcher, as I'm sure you might know. So if you want to give us a rating or a review, I would greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can also go to my website, willcareyisfunny.com. That is CAREY isfunny.com. If you want to make a note of when I'm going to be doing stand-up, I will also be going to, if you are in Las Vegas, April 25th, I will be doing a show at Roll and Smoke Barbecue in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's my first time in Vegas, so I am excited about that. And be well, guys and girls and everybody in between. Thanks for listening. I'm glad to be back, and I'm excited to be bringing you a lot more episodes in 2018. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everyone.